Imagine the things we take for granted not living in a country that is in a war situation. Things as simple as just taking a walk on the street, walking the dog, taking kids to school, or meeting up with friends, or just enjoying the friendly weather at the park, the sunshine and the sunset, the rainbow in the sky without the fear of bombs dropping. Like in Yemen, over 3,600 miles away from where I'm standing, where schools and homes are not safe because they've been targets of bombs, where just walking on the streets can be deadly because of the bullets of a sniper. Footages from a human rights organization and some residents based in Yemen show the horror of a war that some say is forgotten, a war that is far from over. From the UK to Yemen. Scenes like this are commonplace all over Yemen as bombs drop from the sky in Sana'a, the country's capital. Every day, Yemenis live in fear for their lives, not knowing when and where will be the next target. When you go out in the streets in Yemen and people go about your normal activities, how safe is it?
I keep saying that we all in Yemen are safe by accident. So you're not safe because you are really safe. You're safe because you are lucky enough that nothing happened to you.
Radia Al-Mutawakel is the chairperson of Muatana, a human rights organization based in Yemen. Over the last 6 years, our organization's documented a horror happening in Yemen and is a 2021 nominee for the Nobel Peace Prize for their work. Yemen sits in the Arabian Peninsula in the Middle East, edged in 6 years of war between Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates-backed government forces against the Houthis, reportedly supported by Iran. Ansar Allah, simply known as the Houthis, are a Zaidi Shia Islamist armed movement from northern Yemen, said to be loyal to former President Abdullah Saleh, a former enemy turned ally after he was forced out of office following the Arab Spring. Since 2015, the conflict has escalated into a bloody civil war, as this man is seen in this video trying to capture the wreck of an airstrike.
During the war, in different governorates all over Yemen, people have died because of the airstrikes, because of landmines, because of ground chilling, because of live bullets.
Shireen Al Ardimi is an assistant professor at the Michigan State University in America. She left Yemen at the age of 12, a Harvard-trained researcher and educator. She knows well the desperation of the situation in her country of birth.
The situation has been called by the UN the world's worst humanitarian crisis, and I think that's still very much the case, and it's only gotten worse since that designation. People are frustrated. They feel like their lives are on hold. They're obviously traumatized by this war. Bombs dropping every day, or, your life being in danger.
One of the worst hit areas in Yemen is Taiz, the country's third largest city. Some say it has become a haven for snipers and landmines. Government and anti-government forces have been locked in fierce fighting here, as a Saudi-led coalition continues to push back the Houthis from occupying Sana'a. And as in all wars, one of the casualties is education. Schools come under airstrikes, especially those suspected to be occupied by anti-government forces. Around 47 schools have been destroyed so far in this city alone. Al-Wada School is one of them, attacked in 2016. This was the scene in 2019. Children horrified by fighting outside, because in Yemen, getting an education can be a matter of life and death. Now welcome to Al-Wada School in 2021. Outside is a sign on the wall that says, "Beware of mines." This school is a shell that stands precariously, the aftermath of airstrikes. These children still come here at the risk of their lives and the lives of a few teachers, most of whom have not been paid in years. Over 2 million children are out of school in Yemen. Some have lost their parents to the war and must find their own way in the dangerous streets.
The educational system has collapsed, and we have a report that called Undermining the Future, talking about the attacks on schools, because this will not only affect the presence, it will affect our future as Yemenis, because our children are not taking the appropriate education. And we have a study about the impact of the conflict on the educational system.
First of all, schools are not safe because even they have been targets of bombs. But then also there's a lot of internal displacement. So about 4 million people are internally displaced. And when they're internally displaced, they have to go from one place to another. School becomes one of the things that children lose out on.
Many out-of-school children find ways to occupy their time, doing normal things in rather abnormal situations, surrounded by bomb buildings, not thinking of possible landmines buried in the field, or the bullets of a sniper, exposed to danger, but just being children. 11-year-old Shema, not a real name to protect her identity, has a similar story. She's out of school and in search of her father.
أكثر مشكلة في حياتي إنه أبي تفارق عني. بسبب الحرب تشتتت عائلتنا. بسبب الحرب أبي انفصل عن أمي. بسبب الحرب حال أبي اتدهورت المادي والنفسي. يا ليت تتوقف دي الحرب ويرجع أبي لي.
Still in Tahiz, it's not only education and out-of-school children that are victims of this war. This woman seen in this video is one of the thousands of women in Yemen who are widowed by the war and left without support. Deep in grief, she'll rather not speak. Outside, she stares at the rubble of what used to be home and family.
Even for the killing and maiming, women and children are a big part of the victims. And if they are not a very direct victim, then women will just lose the white bread, or the men in the family who are responsible for many things, and she has been left alone because we are in the middle of war and nothing is done.
Women who are pregnant, who are nursing, they themselves are malnourished, and so they're not able to feed their children sufficiently, and they're not able to access healthcare services and food.
There are more tales of woe from the war. Beware of mines, they say in Tahiz. Mohan, not his real name, lost his leg in tragic circumstances. The future is bleak for him and his 9 little children.
وقفت رجلي اليمين جلست أعاني من علاقات ما قد يعني حد وقف جنبي بالعلاقات وهذا كل شيء. الحمد لله في ناس قام الله فأنا خير هذا قاموا بالمهمة يعني وعالجونا. جلست فترة أمشي برجل واحدة عندي 9 أولاد 5 عيال و4 بنات. كم حد عايلهم كنت أشكرهم والله بسكرين.
Now, Moham is just one of the thousands of civilian casualties from the war in Yemen. Around 1,500 casualties were reported in the last 9 months of 2020. So the question is, how did Yemen get here? Is it the result of a proxy war between Saudi Arabia and Iran, or a matter of who controls the central government and by extension controls about 3 billion barrels of proven oil reserves in the country? The sale of ammunition is said to be at the heart of the conflict, as some Western countries are accused of profiteering. The war has also been compounded by other armed groups who control different areas in Yemen, making it a complicated civil war. Now, the US and the UK are the biggest exporters of ammunition to Saudi Arabia, Between 2015 and 2019, the US averaged over $10 billion worth of weapons per year to the Saudis. And between 2015 and 2020, the US and the UK averaged 73% and 13% of weapons to Saudi Arabia, respectively. By 2020, the Saudis had become the largest buyers of weapons in the world. According to a UN report, since the war began, over 1,300 children have been killed in airstrikes and around 100,000 people have been killed in the war. Although the UK is yet to shift its position on arms sales, President Biden of the United States wants to end the war.
This war has to end. And to underscore our commitment, we are ending all American support for offensive operations in the war in Yemen, including relevant arms sales.
The new shift with the Biden administration, it's a new hope. It's a window of hope because through the past 5 or 6 or 7 years, there was no balanced, independent approach from the international community towards the war in Yemen. And arms trade was one reason behind this, financial interest. So if this financial interest has stopped and there's a serious actions toward not to support any party to the conflict and to push in all parties to the conflict to go to peace process, then it can work.
The UN has blamed all sides for possible war crimes, but the body has been accused of not doing enough to hold warring parties accountable. Now, his immediate past special envoy on Yemen, who has recently been redeployed by the UN, is worried about further escalation.
I'm, like all of us, concerned by the intensification of the missile and drone strikes.
However, the UN says it is executing a plan to end the armed conflict. Talking about how complicated this war is, do you see an end to it?
I do, but only if the foreign intervention ends. So this began as a civil conflict, and then foreigners interfered in this conflict and made it worse than Yemenis had ever seen before. First, the war has to end, and then there's a massive debt that all of these countries who have been responsible in the destruction of Yemen, whether they were fueling it with weapon sales or whether they were intentionally, supporting the Saudi-led coalition like the United States is, all of these countries owe a massive debt to Yemen to help it with the reconstruction.
But the question remains, where lies the future of Yemen? A sign on the street somewhere in the country says South Wahed in Arabic, which means one voice. But Gregory Johnson, a Middle East policy expert, believes that Yemen is so fractured that it is unlikely to be one state again. However, 4 years of campaign against arms sales and the war in Yemen continues to reverberate around the world, now 6 years since the war started, as Yemenis continue to be faced with an uncertain future.
Yemen can't wait.